The Conjunction of the Spheres, a great cataclysm that divided the history of the Witcher world into before and after, an event of an incredible scale when whole worlds came out of their primordial paths created by nature, when the boundaries between realities were blurred to barely noticeable barriers, when rifts began to appear here and there in the matter of the planets, and the wild element of primordial magic rushed into open gaps like torrents, filling the worlds with powerful energy, giving the beings from these worlds powers that they could not even think about. Using the gaps in the fabric of reality, using magical currents and thin edges between the worlds, creatures from one planet began to move to others, from ordinary insects to bloodthirsty monsters, and even sentient creatures. All these creatures got into other worlds for different reasons. Predators were looking for new hunting grounds where they could provide themselves with prey. Sentient creatures wandered in search of a new home, better conditions, and unexplored horizons, and others even went to new planets purely by accident. However, let's talk about everything step by step. Let us start. The beginning of the cataclysm, extinction of the Vrans. To begin with, let us recall a little about the events before the cataclysm, which we described in the first two parts of the history of the Witcher universe. There were several sentient races before the conjunction of the spheres. The natives were lizard-like Vrans, as well as the inhabitants of the mountains and hills, gnomes, dwarves, and halflings. Well, let us not forget about the mistresses of the forests, the beautiful nymphs. Also, a race of aliens from another planet called themselves the Mountain People and Shade, and others called them simply elves. The history of this amazing race and its journey between worlds got also covered in our past issues of the history of the Witcher universe. The elves were a really powerful and developed civilization. They possessed magic, easily built cities, and no one wanted to conflict with them. Still, the Vrans once tried to show the elves their strength and paid dearly for it. As a result of a short war, the elves literally squeezed the native people from their original lands to the outskirts of the continent, where the Vran civilization was barely able to survive. So before the beginning of the cataclysm of the conjunction of the spheres, it was the Ant Shade who established themselves as the ruling race, and it was for them that fate prepared the most difficult tests. The cataclysm of the conjunction of the spheres began quite suddenly. Rather, its beginning was noticed quite suddenly. At one point, completely unique creatures that had not been seen there before simply began to appear. The stars changed their appearance in the sky. Portals began to appear here and there chaotically all over the planet. Through the cracks in the fabric of the world, magical energy flowed, which was mastered by the most amazing creatures, from gnomes to powerful anthropomorphic inhabitants of some swamps. For example, the Crookback Bog. Magic gave life to many creatures, and even to inanimate things. Chaos reigned in the world, and the elves, they decided to isolate themselves in their castles and cities, and they did not interfere in any way with the chaos that was happening around. They did not try to close the portals, nor to heal the wounds of the fabric of space and time. They only watched and tried to defend themselves from crazy bloodthirsty alien monsters. At the same time, the Vran race, which was thrown out by the elves from their native lands, finally perished in the new realities of the changing world. Along with monsters from other planets came alien diseases, and the climate was also greatly deformed. All these factors finished off the race of Vrans, and a few years after the beginning of the conjunction of the spheres, the original race of lizard people ceased to exist, and even the memory of these creatures began to disappear without a trace. This was the first result of the conjunction of the spheres, the first one, only the first one, because the cataclysm stretched over hundreds of years, and many more events took place until the planets finally calmed down their wild dance and entered new stable orbits on the great spiral of space. Monsters, vampires, demigods, and other aliens. You might ask, why did the cataclysm actually happen? What moved dozens of worlds? What broke the very foundation of the world order? Well, the answer to these questions is in the previous part of the history of the Witcher universe. Go ahead and watch. Omnipresent elves were there again. And if you have already watched it and you know everything, then let us move on. Because in addition to the fact that the cataclysm finished off the race of Vrans, it also brought a huge mass of unique creatures, both wild and bloodthirsty, and sentient, or even highly developed. So let's talk about them, about the new arrivals on the mainland. Let's start with completely innocent creatures. These can include, for example, Dopplers, Godlings, and Gremlins. Yes, gremlins also exist in the Witcher's universe. These creatures were most definitely looking for a way back to their native worlds. This world was not suitable for them at all, and yet a large part of them could not find their way to their native planet and therefore remained to exist on the mainland, trying to survive and find a place for themselves in the new world. Gremlins, for example, hid on the ground or in caves, minimizing contact. On the other hand, godlings tried to get into the houses or cities of intelligent races. They found shelter and food in these houses. It was generally much easier for dopplers in cities. These creatures could take on the appearance of any humanoid. However, in addition to peaceful aliens, various monsters have arrived, from hideous necrophages to huge chorts. There were so many monsters that the elves didn't even have time to classify them. Leshen, Spriggans, Fiends, Chorts, Hydras, Aguaras, Krakens, Sylvans, and many others. Bloodthirsty and hungry, they first of all looked for prey. They ravaged forests and fields, eating wild animals. They attacked caravans of gnomes or dwarves on the roads. They did not hesitate to go even to elven settlements. Hundreds and thousands of monsters that were incredibly difficult to fight. They changed everything. They brought a colossal amount of death to the mainland. The number of wild animals decreased, and therefore it became more difficult to get food. Peoples survived, adapted to new realities. Cities were built not with terraces and amphitheaters, but with walls and towers. But even this did not always help. As we have already noted before, in addition to monsters, new diseases have arrived and the climate of the planet has also changed quite a lot. In short, within one generation, the inhabitants of the mainland found themselves in a completely different world, a cruel and deadly one where every step can be the last. The development of the native races was even more halted. It was necessary to survive, not to understand the intricacies of magic or science at that moment. As we said before, the Vren people were completely wiped out by the cataclysm of the Conjunction of the Spheres. There is not a single living representative of the lizard people race left, the race that once dominated the mainland. The gnomes, halflings, and dwarves, on the other hand, eventually went to the mountains, built their big strongholds there, and did not really want to go down to the forests and fields. Elves did not multiply quickly enough to inhabit large areas of the mainland. They, of course, remained completely without competition for land. They built cities here and there. They protected themselves from monsters with magic. However, their state was not gigantic and did not have a normal unitary structure. The race of Ain Undad simply did not think that they would have to fight anyone. Therefore, each city lived as it saw fit, only formally submitting to one king. So large spaces remained wild, inhabited by absolutely amazing and unique creatures. Powerful witches of the Crookback Bog, masters of illusion magic, the Aguaras, and also nearly almighty higher vampires. By the way, about the vampires, it was vampires who arrived with almost the biggest number of them in comparison to others. That is, if you count all types of these bloodsuckers. Formally, they could be divided into unreasonable, higher ones, and powerful demigods. Mindless beasts like Fledders or Nosferats were ordinary monsters. They hunted all living things to get their fill of blood and did not possess the gift of thinking. Higher vampires were already much more intelligent beings. It was quite difficult to distinguish them from the other races in everyday life. It is obvious that these vampires came from some world of their own, where they had a permanent civilization with its own clear hierarchy. However, vampires were not too willing to unite even in some settlements. Each of them tried to live their lives, explore the new world, and make contact with its inhabitants. It was the higher vampires who became the main fear after the Conjunction of the Spheres. Books were written about them and fables were told, such as the story that a vampire can be killed by cutting off its head, stuffing garlic in its mouth, and burying the head away from the body. Everything was not so simple. A higher vampire could be reborn even from several fragments of flesh, regenerating the body. And one higher vampire could be killed only by another higher vampire, the latter having sucked absolutely all the blood from the former. Because only blood gives a vampire strength and the ability to live. Therefore, a vampire can only be satisfied with blood. It is not like any other food. By the way, write in the comments if you want an issue purely about the vampires of the Witcher universe. The higher vampires were incredibly powerful. However, for some reason they didn't do it, and when the cataclysm of the Conjunction of the Spheres ended, they generally began to look for a way back to their native world, realizing that they belong only there and nowhere else. Maybe one day they will find their way back to their planet. Especially there are even more powerful creatures among them, those who can contend with real demons or even gods in their power. the elder vampires. They are the patriarchs of all other vampires, smart and stupid. They are lords and masters, to whom it is necessary to obey without a second thought. Their number is not high, because in order for a higher vampire to become an elder vampire, he needs to live more than 1,000 years and pass more than one test. Even the elves would hardly be able to resist the might of an armada of lesser vampires, followed by a guard of higher vampires under the leadership of possibly the most powerful beings on the planet, for whom space and time are words that have long since lost their meaning. But wait, we forgot the main thing. The new race that appeared precisely during the conjunction of the spheres, the real intelligent race who arrived in the unexplored lands of the mainland and called these lands their own, the race who will decide the fate of this world, the humans. Arrival of humans. The last post-conjunction of the sphere's newcomers docked at the mouths of Pontar and Yaruga on ships, and they called themselves humans. They were similar to elves visually, only their features were rougher and their ears were not pointed. There are legends that humans somehow destroyed their home world and therefore were forced to look for a new planet to live on. The conjunction of the spheres literally saved their civilization. The first humans landed on the northern shores of the continent, to the lands that are currently called the Kingdom of Cover and Pavis. They were wild humans, humans who probably during the long journey completely forgot who they were and where they were from. They formed the first human tribes and settlements. They called themselves dogs or Vosgors. Perhaps these humans were sent to explore the world. They tried to understand whether it was suitable for life, or maybe not. In any case, very soon 3 ships with white sails appeared on the horizon of the Great Sea. On board, there were no longer wild tribes, but quite intelligent humans, the remnants of the whole nations together with their kings or rulers. Why exactly there were so few ships is unknown. Rumor has it that the humans, a naturally warlike and cruel race, quarreled during their escape from the world they had destroyed. They fought each other even on the road, sinking each other's ships until there were only 3 of them left. But in any case, it happened. 2 of those 3 ships were docked at the mouth of the Pontar River. Another one was near the mouth of the Yaruga River, immigrants from another planet. It was there on the shores that they founded their first settlements. And it was from those settlements that the 3 first states of humans later arose: Temeria and Redania on different banks of Pontar, and Sintra on the banks of the Yaruga. You might ask, wait, how did the humans even survive? They arrived on the mainland, straight to the hundreds and thousands of bloodthirsty monsters. Their weak settlements should have been crushed in the first days. What protected them? And I will answer. Humans were protected by their incredible ability to adapt to any living conditions, and they were also protected by magic. So humans were incredibly lucky, because on the same ships there were those who literally instinctively felt the magical energy. They saw it in the air, water, and on land. They did not yet know how to use it to its full extent, but they trusted their instincts and gradually began to master magic, to understand it. This gift was available only to a few random humans on ships, those who had a natural talent for magic. However, even this was already a real miracle. The first sorcerer of the human race was a certain Ian Becker. We don't know what he did on his home planet, and we don't know his history before the human ships arrived on the mainland. However, we do know one thing. As soon as Becker set foot on the mainland, he already subconsciously felt the magic. He took in his hands a stone that was lying near his feet, twisted that stone in his hands, and directed the magical energy that he felt around to that stone. And miraculously, water splashed from the stone. Real, delicious, fresh water. It was magic. The first magic performed by the race of the humans. Among the settlers, there were a few more humans who felt the energy of chaos. Giambattista, Eva Roche, Geoffrey Monk, and others. However, it was Ian Becker who was able to use magic for the first time, and it helped humans to survive a lot. In the first settlements, Ian Becker, together with his colleagues, took care of the weather so that the first harvest of grains that humans brought on their ships would not be lost. He diverted the waves of the sea from small rickety houses. He used the power of magic to build fences and fortifications around the settlements, protected humans from bloodthirsty monsters. He practiced a lot, and this practice only increased his skill. Ian Becker understood magic more and more, and that's why the magic he created was more and more grandiose. Cities began to emerge from ordinary human settlements very quickly, all thanks to magic. Each of these three tribes had its own leader, a kind of a ruler who managed all the processes and created some of the first rules and laws. Humans had still their religion from the old world. Temples with monuments also began to be erected. Settlements grew like yeast thanks to the help of the first mages, who better understood the elements of chaos. Soon the settlements grew into small kingdoms, and the cataclysm of the conjunction of the spheres ended quite soon after the arrival of humans. If we take into account all the evidence, we can say that in general this cataclysm lasted a little less than 1,000 years, the witch world would never return to its normal natural state after that. It will now be forever filled with aliens. Monster aliens, wild and bloodthirsty aliens, humanoid aliens, smart, cunning and powerful aliens, human aliens, those who are ready to build a civilization that will reshape this world once again in the future, reshape it their way, overcome all obstacles, even if the first obstacle is the End-Shade Elves. Yes, humans will meet the dominant ones, the so-called rulers of this world. Humans will meet the elves of the End-Shade. And what will happen next? There was a lot of interesting stuff. Agreements, expansion, developments, conflicts, blood, war, even genocide. However, that'll be spoken of in our next video, because the conjunction of the spheres has ended. The portals between the worlds suddenly began to close, the wounds in the fabric of space healed, the boundaries of reality became strong again, and a new stage in the history of the witch universe began. This is how we got to the period after the conjunction of the spheres. If you want to thank us for the video, then hit the like and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the bell so you don't miss the next issues of the history of the Witcher universe. This helps our channel grow a lot. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end.